Hey everyone, thanks for joining another episode on Banking on Experience. I'm your host today, James Gilbert. We're very excited to do this today because it's something that I don't think credit unions are focused enough on, but we're going to talk about how you can diversify yourself through your language skills. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us on another episode on Banking on Experience. Today, our guest is Luis Valdez-Jimenez. Luis, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I am very excited to be here.
Luis, give us a little bit of background about who you are. Why are we talking about this topic?
Absolutely. So my name is Luis Valdez-Jimenez, and I'm just like many other Americans, someone who kind of realized late in the game about why languages matter. Now, you may be thinking, well, wait a minute, you got a Spanish name. What do you mean you didn't take this as seriously as expected? Well, turns out I was born and raised in the U.S., and so I am what is called a heritage Spanish speaker. So I spoke Spanish at home, but English was my primary language because I went to school in English. My friends spoke English. And then when I went to do my university studies, for example, my law degree and my MBA, and then throughout my career, I've always spoken English. And so it wasn't until later on in life where I realized the value of understanding another language and how that could help a professional and a student launch their careers, but also how languages can help any organization convert the language barrier into a competitive advantage. And I really want to help financial institutions like credit unions, which have a special place in my heart because I serve on a credit union board, but any institution that really wants to serve a growing, expanding, and increasing spending power community to really learn how to use language skills to set them apart and to really thrive in an ever increasingly competitive global market.
Love it, Luis. You know, what's interesting is a lot of people may not know this, but you are also a contributor on the CU Insight. So that's how I found him. Is he's a contributor there. He talked about a language article that I thought was very, very interesting. That's how we got here. I think it's so fascinating, the business opportunity that is missed because of the fact that there's not a focus on languages. You know, if you have a community that's diverse and you have other languages that are spoken, it might not be primary language is English, sure, but there might be other languages that are spoken in the community. And for example, Spanish. Imagine the amount of business that you're losing just because you can't serve them. You can't answer simple questions. They're going to go to a bank. That's a bummer for credit unions, right? That's the no-no word.
Exactly. And get this, the Hispanic community here in the United States, it itself has a spending power over $1.4 trillion. And so literally these immigrant communities, they're rising in their spending power, and it's literally hundreds of millions and even trillions of dollars. And this is money that could be used. It could be utilized. It could be pursued. But it's there, and unfortunately, not just the Latino community, but in general, minority communities are very heavily underbanked. They're very heavily underbanked. And it's a real travesty because I can tell you from experience, sometimes I watch Spanish TV, like Telemundo or Univision, and all of a sudden, a bank shows up with an English language ad. And I'm like, you idiot. You know, in Spanish, we say, idiota. You know, like, do you not understand that if people can't understand your ad is completely worthless? And you didn't even bother to translate your ad into Spanish? Do you not think that may come off as being disrespectful to the people who are watching your ad? So it's a complete missed opportunity. You know, how many times have we heard stories about people walking into a bank and they walk out because they literally can't communicate with anyone? That's true.
I remember some of the very first moments of my entire working career was I was working cell phones. It was when cell phones very first came out, and I was working cell phones, and I remember people would come in, and I didn't know how to speak Spanish at that time. And by the way, I'm not a fluent Spanish speaker anymore. I used to be, not anymore, but they used to come in, and I used to try as hard as I could to figure out what they needed. But there was often times that I felt like a complete idiot because I could not serve them. And a lot of them would walk away because we didn't have a Spanish speaker there that could help them. And I mean, that's business that we're losing. That's an experience that they've had that they now tie to your brand that they're never going to forget. Right. And that's the importance of this. I mean, credit unions are all about community, and they're all about making sure that they're involved more and that they're seen as a community leader. Well, if you're going to do that, you also have to be able to serve the other part of the community that isn't getting served today. And that's typically a language barrier that happens there. So I love the fact that you're talking about this today, because I think a big challenge that people have is, well, how do we become more diverse to handle languages? I mean, our current employees and our current tellers and loan officers, they can't speak Spanish. So what is out there, number one, that people can do to train their current employees? And number two, if they don't have employees that are multilingual, what can financial institutions do to help find the talent?
Absolutely. Those are great questions. And I think we need to view languages, first off, as a real professional skill. Just like how every financial institution needs individuals who can do basic math. They need individuals who can work the IT systems. They need individuals who can handle security aspects. There are so many different functions that go into the successful operation of any kind of financial institution, and languages is one of them. And financial institutions of all kinds have to adapt their strategies in order to tap this market. And there's several ways that this can be done. The first way is you can hire on-site translators. You can hire someone as a translator, as an interpreter, and they can be on site. The problem is, this can be a little bit of a logistical hassle. They may be expensive. And so it may not be the wisest solution. Instead, the best idea is to actually hire people to work in your organization who speak the languages that are most commonly spoken in your community. In fact, there's a huge upswing in multilingual hiring. A report by the New American Economy stated that within 5 years, demand for bilingual workers more than doubled. And so there's an absolute increasing need and desire for these bilingual workers. And in fact, there are other financial institutions who are trying to do this. That same report highlighted several employers who've revamped their strategies. And one of those employers was Bank of America. They have a very concentrated effort to make sure that a significant amount of the people they hire are multilingual. And, it's turning out pretty well for them. And not just from a benefit standpoint, but also from a risk management standpoint, it's very important to have individuals who actually speak the language. Wells Fargo, an institution that a lot of individuals, including myself, don't like, well, they got into trouble for a lot of reasons. And one of the reasons they got in trouble was because they were accused of pushing among minority, especially Latino communities, financial products without actually explaining the complex nature of the financial products in the other language. So these people were signing up for these complex financial products and bank accounts, but they didn't actually understand what they were doing. And so as part of the settlement, they are now bringing on people and making sure that they can actually translate and communicate into a different language what it is these people are actually signing for. So there's also an important risk management element of making sure you have people within your own organization who at the branches, at the front lines, who are able to communicate effectively in the other language.
I think it's interesting that you bring up the risk management thing. When you were talking about that, I thought about one thing. I know this is going to sound kind of random, but whatever. When we purchase, let's say, furniture, and it comes to our house and it has a manual, that manual is usually in multiple languages, right? For good reason. I mean, you don't want to put a bed together wrong and have your kids sleep on it, and then boom, like you put it together wrong. That's a bad thing. But imagine the fact that like right now we're talking about people's financial health, their money. You mess with people's money, that's no bueno.
You're right. I literally got an air fryer the other day, and the manual came in like 7 different languages. If we do it air fryers, why not for their financial health?
Exactly. I completely agree with you. I mean, and to your point, like maybe another way to address this, right, is if you don't have people that can speak the language, or let's say you don't have the bandwidth as an organization to bring on multilingual skill. The other option here is it's certainly not hard, right, to at least get majority of the way there to help serve them. If there are terms of a loan, or if there are terms of your checking account or savings account that you can't explain in English, then at least print it out in paper in their language, right? Give them at least an option. Like, I mean, I know relating it back to the furniture, it's at least something that they can be served by, right? And then you can work towards the bigger future of having multilingual. Because to your point, I guarantee you that people will go to a Bank of America that does have that skill set, because when they have a more complex question, they need to be able to have it answered. And going back to the days of when I was doing cell phones, I can strictly remember when we actually got somebody that spoke Spanish fluently, and they came and they were an employee. I mean, I'm telling you, the entire Spanish community in this little town that I was working in, the entire Spanish community came in. And that's where they went. There was no other cell phone store at all that they went to, because we were the only ones that could do it.
No, you're absolutely right. And Bank of America has not only increased their hiring of it, but they've also taken an extra step. They've gotten a lot of their employees language certified. So there's a company, for example, called Language Testing International. What they do is you can basically take a test, and they will certify how fluent you are in a language skill. And Bank of America and other companies use that as an actual barometer as to how fluent are you, and are you fluent enough? So now what they're making sure is that they're getting not just bilingual people, multilingual, but actually high quality as well. And that is going to, yes, it's a little bit of an extra investment, but they see the return on that because they're getting all that business that's completely underserved.
I love this. We've changed the way that we do business. Many organizations, their employees, even us as consumers, work from home. So let's talk about the impact of what we are living in, which I hate to say it, but the new normal, right? Let's talk about how there's a need for even more of this now. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're all working from home, and we even see this in my credit union, that for the credit union I serve on, we had to shut down all our branches for months. And what we had to do was we had to go into a concerted effort to try to get as much as we can onto a virtual platform, as much as we could do virtually. And language is no different than that. In fact, you can even argue that this could be even arguably easier under this kind of circumstance, because you can connect people on the back end with a language service, and you're better able to connect. So you don't have the risk of someone walking in and by the odd chance there's someone there who speaks the language. Now, if someone's calling in, you can have a team at the ready, at the go, who's able to speak and communicate in that language.
I'm glad you mentioned it's easier, because it is. I mean, we have so much technology at our fingertips right now. While it's important to get the accuracy of the language right, there is at least some tentative measures that can be taken. Like another example is when I was, a lot of people know this story, but I had a credit union that I worked with here in Utah, and their primary means of communication with COVID and their branches closing was through text. Well, text can very easily be translated to a different language. It's actually really not difficult at all. I mean, heck, if you have an iPhone, you can tell Siri to translate it for you, and it might get 75, 80% there. And that's better than not having it at all.
Yep, right. And there are those tools that can help you. Although I do caution, don't be overly reliant on those tools, because if you play around with Google Translate enough, you can get some really weird mistranslations. And it's,
no doubt.
Yeah. So those kind of tools can be helpful supplements, but they cannot take the place of an actual human being that can understand the context of what is actually being spoken. And that's going to be extremely helpful.
Yeah, completely agree with you. Let's talk about, what are some examples of this, Luis? Like, give us one or two examples of a company You kind of talked about a couple of them, but give us some more. Do you have any other examples of companies that are doing this really, really well?
Yeah, there's a lot of companies who are doing this well, and there's a lot of companies who are not doing this well. Just very quickly, there was a report by the U.S. Chamber for Economic Development that estimates that American companies lose every year about $2 billion a year to the language and cultural miscommunication. That's literally billions of dollars left on the table that's being lost. And we're seeing many companies around the world, especially companies that have customer-centric focus, that they're using language skills to go ahead and improve. For example, hospitals are doing this. Why? Because they've seen malpractice cases for mistranslations. Banks are starting to do this because they're seeing the lawsuits coming in, but also they're seeing there's underserved communities. And so there's plenty of examples out there of companies that are doing it. In fact, here's actually, even on a macroeconomic level, there was a report that from a few economists that Switzerland estimates that about 10% of their GDP is generated through their multilingual skills. So Switzerland is known as a country that's very multilingual. A lot of them speak German, French, Italian, English, and other languages. The United Kingdom did also another report. They believe their economy is being held back about 3.5% because of their lack of multilingual skills, because they have a harder time communicating with the rest of the global economy. And so even on a macroeconomic level, there impacts of languages. I mean, right now, about 20%, 25% of Americans are fully bilingual. Imagine how our economy will grow, especially in a globalized economy, if more and more Americans were multilingual. I mean, just think about it.
And it's interesting, too, because a lot of people, when they hear a small percentage like 3%, they think, oh, that's not that big of a deal. But when you actually think about how that equates to the dollar and the trillions of dollars that are out there, I mean, that's a giant amount.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some credit unions would die to have that type of revenue. So, I mean, even converting on a tiny percentage of that, being a differentiator in the market versus some of the people that are not doing this can yield huge dividends for revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is no longer a situation of, oh, well, this is important if you're like really close to the border or if you're in a city with a traditional large immigrant community. The fact is that's no longer true. There are more and more counties and municipalities throughout this country that are actually having majority populations. And I'll even tell you, like, when I lived in Wisconsin actually has a pretty big Latino community that's starting to get up there. So all throughout this country, you're starting to see these minority communities building up, and you're also seeing the communities being more interconnected, in a way that wasn't before. And it's just almost globalization of even local economies. And so everywhere you're starting to see the importance of working with other cultures, working with other languages. And so even local, quote unquote, local credit unions are starting to have to deal with these macro issues.
So do you think that every credit union out there, regardless of where they're at, what location they're at, needs to have a focus here? Do you think that, or maybe a better question would be, how can a credit union decide if this needs to be an initiative?
Look at your member base. Every credit union that's going to survive has to understand who their member base is, who are their customer base. And they also have to compare that with what is the community around them. And so if a credit union wants to actually serve that community, they have to take into account who is actually around them. And if they're starting to see numbers like 10, 15, 20, 25% of the population being of immigrant backgrounds or minority backgrounds or backgrounds that may speak another language, then that's a real serious conversation that they need to start having, even if it's just a small number, like 5 or 10%. If you think about it on a community level, that could be hundreds of millions of dollars. And so a credit union really needs to do an in-depth focus on its member base, but also on a general community, especially a community they may want to expand to, and see, okay, there may be an opportunity here. And some credit unions may push back and say, well, that's an extra cost. Yeah, but that could also unleash so much more benefits. So I wouldn't view it as a cost. I would view it more as an investment, because if you don't serve them, somebody else will.
Well put, my friend. That's some good stuff right there. What are 3 to 4 things people can do to leverage their language skills in their communication? Let's talk about it from a functional standpoint of a business. So, I have a marketing background. So let's start there. Then let's go into sales and support and service, because it's different for each, right? So let's start from a marketing perspective. What can you do to leverage their language skills there?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, you need to be able to communicate your value in the other language. You can't be running English language ads on Telemundo or on or on it, in my honest opinion. You're completely wasting the value of the ad. And so what I would suggest is look at the media markers around you. Is there a Spanish radio station? Is there a Spanish TV station? Is there a Spanish newspaper? If you're doing similar activities in English language mediums, why not also do it in Spanish mediums and actually do it in Spanish or whatever local language that's there? Close to where I live, there's actually a pretty historic Polish community. And they have a lot of it. They have Polish newspapers, they have Polish community events, and you see some of the credit unions out there mobilizing in force with Polish language materials for the members of that community, and it works for them. And so definitely look at the media channels and platforms that you have there and utilize them. They're oftentimes underutilized. So have those strategic partnerships. Another aspect is look at what other institutions are in the community. Is there a charity? Is there a church? Or is there some kind of community institution that is a bedrock of that community that you can partner with? I mean, if you're doing this already for example, any other charity or any other park or any other, sometimes even local governments, if you're already doing those kind of partnerships for an English-speaking audience, you can do the same thing in a Spanish or other foreign language audience as well. And then finally, you need to have people on your team who can actually communicate the value of your institution. So if someone walks into your branch and they start asking about opening a bank account or starting up a loan or creating some kind of an investment in another language, you need to have people, or at the very least, resources readily available so that you can go ahead and serve that need. And so it has to be a comprehensive organizational-wide approach in order to really improve that communication, in order to see that improved actual market performance.
Yeah, now I will say this. I know it seems like we might be being kind of hard on the credit unions, but just for the record, like, this is a problem with a lot of businesses. It's not just the credit unions. It's the local mom and pop shops. I would even say it's the big retailers as well. So know that you're not alone in this. This is something that needs to be addressed. I think it's also important to recognize the fact that this is also serving the diversity problem that our country is struggling with so much. And it can't be forgot about that it's not just a matter of being bilingual or multilingual that draws that in, but then it's also bringing in different cultures and diversity that needs to happen within a credit union and needs to happen within the business world anyway. So you're serving kind of a dual purpose here. And Luis, what have you seen from your perspective in like a credit union that does this really, really well and starts bringing in the multi-language skill set within their employees? How does it change and shift how the community sees them as a cultural fit?
It's a great question. And just think about it. Any other credit union does this with their English-speaking audience. Most credit unions, what they do is they try to establish themselves as a bedrock in their community. They establish connections with local institutions, media outlets, and et cetera. It's really not that complicated to do the exact same thing for another context. But to your point about the diversity piece, you're absolutely right. This is not just a feel-good diversity statement on a social media platform. This is an actual, real, tangible step forward in the progress of actual achieving diversity and inclusion means, and actually trying to serve these people. I mean, if your credit union says with one side of its mouth, yes, we care about the minority communities, well, if you really care about them, try to actually serve their banking needs. In general, these communities are severely underbanked. So you make a concerted effort to actually serve them and to communicate with them and to actually help them secure their financial futures. That goes far beyond choose a simple statement, oh, we support diversity. Okay, well, what does that mean? You're actually putting it into practice by actually bringing in individuals who understand and can reflect the diversity, and not just on the branch employee level. I mean, honestly, I would challenge every board to think about every credit union to think about who's on their board. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I've been to board conferences where I am, far younger than the average age by a couple decades. And I'm one of the very few non-white and also it's also very sad to say that there's very few women who serve on these credit union boards. And so I would even challenge credit unions to really think, okay, if you are really serious about this, then take a look at your board and take a look at who serves as your executive team. And if there's severe lack of representation there, then that's something that has to be addressed. And showing these communities that you're willing to invest yourself in actually improving that community by having a member on their board or having a member of the C-suite or by having members actually on the front office desk who are members of the community will really show that you actually care. And I can tell you from personal experience, a lot of the minority communities, we develop a sense of loyalty that's hard to break. If we feel that we're really served, we will be very loyal customers. And we'll bring our families along too. We'll bring our friends along too. So, I mean, you make that emotional connection to us, you'll definitely see a lot of return.
I'm telling you, you hit the nail on the head there. I've seen this firsthand. Like, businesses that have a focus on bringing in this piece and actually acting on it, not just talking about it, but actually doing something about it. It does. To your point, it brings their families, it brings their friends. They know that they can come in. I go to a barbershop here that's pretty close to us. And I know this isn't credit union, but it's a similar concept. And this barbershop, it's the best that I've ever gone to. I'm talking about, like, I've been to a lot all over the nation. And this one in particular is very, very diverse. They have Spanish speakers. They have folks that can speak Chinese. They have folks that can speak all different types of languages. And what's really, really cool about this barbershop is it translates in the experience that I have there. I mean, it's just so cool to see. And I think that, to your point, there are so many people that won't go to another barbershop because of that. They have caught this massive following as this little barbershop here in Utah just because of the fact that they have that cultural diversity, and they've taken a stand and actually acted on it. And it started with language. And it started there, right? That's the first step, is they got barbers that could speak the language of the community. And now, guess what? Majority of people that come in and get their haircuts, whole families come in on a Saturday, and literally they're just lined up with their boys and their daughters, and moms and dads are all there, all lined up, ready to get their haircuts or their beards trimmed.
No, that works.
Well, Luis, we're at time, but I think this is such a cool subject. I think that we should do this again sometime. Again, I'd love to have you on again. So hopefully today was helpful for the listeners, and thank you again for joining us.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed this conversation. And if you're interested in learning more about the work I do, you can check out my website, www.languageventuresinc.com. And I'd love to hear back from you. I'd love to get your feedback, and I'd love to help your organization try to implement these goals and try to really tap all these amazing benefits that are just, it's like money being left on the table. Why do that?
Luis, if somebody wanted to reach out to you directly, what's the best way for them to do it?
You can look me up on my website. I also have an Instagram account at language_ventures. And then also I have an email address, which is speakboldly@languageventuresinc.com.
Love it, Luis. Thank you again for joining us.